Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Public Works Finance Safety Committee meeting of Monday, March 4th, 2019. The first item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion and second for approval?
So move.
Moved by Manti, second by Roby. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Second item on the agenda is public input. Is there anyone here who wants to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 3, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion and second for approval? Moved by Vilhauer. Second by Albertson. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 4 is council authorization for the mayor to sign the 2018 Annual Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System MS4 report for the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. And I'll look for a motion and second for approval.
So move.
Moved by Lallam and second by Manti. And we'll let Heath give us the scoop on this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Excuse me, fighting a little bit of cold here, so bear with me as I summarize this for you. So the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Annual Report, otherwise known as the MS4 report, is due annually to the South Dakota DENR. This report is a result of the Clean Water Act, essentially. Clean Water Act was established back in the 1970s and amended several times since then. One of the most recent amendments back in the 90s had a substantial effect on local communities and municipalities throughout the nation and was implemented in 2 different phases, of Phase 1 and Phase 2, depending on the population of those municipalities. City of Watertown falls under the regulations of the Clean Water Act, and this MS4 reporting is one of the components of those regulations. It essentially required the communities to put in best management practices to help prevent surface water, help prevent erosion and sediment from occurring and ending up into the surface waters of the state. And so over the last several years, I'm sure several of you council members have seen this report come through every year annually about this time. Watertown has implemented best management practices that are categorized in 6 different control measures, and I'll just quickly touch on each one of those control measures. The first one being public education and outreach. That one's pretty self-explanatory. It's about what the city is doing to educate the general public on what it means to safeguard our surface waters and help prevent erosion and sediment and other contaminants from ending up in our surface waters. We have several ways that we accomplish that goal. The lingo in the industry is called BMPs, Best Management Practices. And one of those public outreach measures just occurred this last weekend at the home show, where the city sets up a booth and we hand out all kinds of information, not only about the stormwater program that the city has, but all kinds of other information that's city related. But that component there is one measurable goal that we include in this report so that DENR can see that we're making earnest efforts towards educating the general public about these regulations and why they're important to safeguard the community's waters. The second objective is public involvement and participation. That's where the community has measures in place to foster public involvement and public comment time at those meetings. That particular measure there helps us meet these goals because anybody is welcome to come during the public comment session of the council meeting and express concerns or questions about the MS4 program within Watertown. So that's one example there. We also have an illicit discharge detection and elimination program goal, and that one we partner heavily with Mike Berger and his folks and Rob and their folks in the streets and wastewater departments. And what that is that we don't want to see illegal contaminants being directly disposed of into our storm sewer systems. And we have measures in place to help detect that and prevent that, and then ramifications if we do find something like that has happened. The fifth measure being post-construction stormwater management. And, or excuse me, I skipped one there. Construction site stormwater runoff control. That one is pretty self-explanatory too. That's where we have requirements on construction projects where a stormwater pollution prevention plan is required, otherwise known as a SWIP, and silt fence and straw wattles and things of that nature are required to be on a construction site to help prevent erosion from occurring and to help capture sediment if erosion does occur. And so we have measures in place to help meet that goal. And then the post-construction stormwater management is kind of a multifaceted approach there too, where what post-construction measures are in place after a site is developed. One, we require paving of our streets when development occurs, so we don't have gravel washed down into the storm sewer system. Another one that we're all very familiar with is the detention pond requirements, both for quality and quantity. Those are both post-construction BMPs that help us manage our storm sewer systems throughout the community on a quality and quantity basis. And I think that that more or less sums up the contents of the report. We submit this here in early March, and usually we'll get feedback from the DENR on any shortfalls that they see that in our report or anything that they think we need to address. And then we work on those items throughout this coming year in addressing any concerns that they might have. From my understanding, we did look back in the 2018 submittal, and we did not receive any correspondence back from the DENR with issues to be addressed. We're not quite sure if that was an oversight or if we just didn't have any issues to address. But I know there were staffing issues at the DENR level, and they maybe just didn't get to it last year. But we'll look for those comments this year and bring forward any concerns that they might have to you guys, and we'll work on them throughout this year as well.
Thank you, Heath. Are there any questions? Councilman Danforth?
Heath, do they ever come and, is there ever an actual audit, an on-site audit, where they would come in and say, let's go through this?
That's a good point. You know, my previous experiences are that, yes, they do that at random. Again, with the staffing levels, it's rare that that occurs, but I don't know, the mayor or Colin might have knowledge of any of the recent past inspections that maybe have occurred here in Watertown, but I do know that does happen at random.
They've been by at least once a year, and I met with them as the assistant city engineer. Did you meet with them, Colin? No? So I know they have been shorthanded at DENR, but they don't like to tell you when they're coming so that they can catch you just business as usual, make sure that business as usual is correct. So we have been notified each time they've inspected of little things they'd like us to tweak. And so they didn't visit last year, so we didn't have anything to tweak. But I think we're pretty good at it. I mean, we've been around the block a few times and trying to do what they ask us to do. Any other questions? See none, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 5 is request award of landfill compactor to Butler Machinery for their bid pursuant to Sourcewell, formerly NJPA pricing, with a $245,000 5-year, 10,000-hour repurchase agreement. So look for a motion, second for approval. So moved by Bueller, second by Manti, and Mike is here to tell us about this.
Yes, the department recommends the award of the Butler Machinery landfill compactor bid pursuant to Sourcewell pricing. As the mayor mentioned, it comes with a $245,000 buyback, so that the net purchase price here is $508,567.03, which is $108,115.97 lower than the 2020 CIP budget budgeted for this purchase, and we're purchasing at this time, so we have delivery by January 2020, so that we'll replace the existing compactor prior to the expiration of the repurchase agreement and warranty on the existing compactor. And then this is our first recommendation of an equipment bid pursuant to sourcewell pricing. Utilizing sourcewell pricing is an approved purchase method. Many of the state equipment bids are based on Sourcewell, formerly NJPA bids. And so I did talk with the state prior to the meeting to kind of get schooled on this. And so the Sourcewell bid pricing is very efficient, and so we get a bid price without the time-consuming task of developing specifications for the purchase. Butler Machinery has many mobile technicians in Watertown, Aberdeen, and Sioux Falls. I can tell you that both Sioux Falls and the city of Rapid City operate Butler Caterpillar compactors, and they report excellent service. And with that, this bid also includes Caterpillar's premier full coverage warranty, and it includes the GPS compaction system. And some of you may be aware of that. I may have talked about it, where the machine senses how much it is sinking or compacting the waste. And when you quit sinking, you're no longer compacting, and you're wasting fuel. So then you're done making passes over garbage. So it's a very efficient piece of equipment. And with that, I'll try to answer any questions you might have.
So the $245,000 is the repurchase amount?
Yes.
But the original purchase amount is?
Yeah. $753,567.03, and then at the end of the 5 years, so we bid it with the repurchase agreement for a couple of reasons. One, we know the net cost. The net cost of this purchase is $508,567.03, and then the bidders also know that they're getting back their own brand of compactor that they have parts for and that they service, because they really don't want their competitions. And so this way, I tell you, that's a fantastic repurchase price. It's more than twice we've ever seen. And so, yeah, we're well within our budget on it.
At the end of the 5 years?
Right.
So
We have to make the expenditure.
you have to front the extra?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we've got
Correct.
the ability to do that?
Yeah, and that's the way these have all been purchased, yes.
Yeah. Other questions? Councilman Vilhauer?
Kristen, how do we book this? Do we book it at the net amount up front, or do we book it at the gross amount?
What do you mean, as far as when the purchase is made?
I mean, will we book this at the 754,000?
For a fixed asset, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
so I mean, aren't we exceeding the budget amount, even though we got the buyback at the end? Don't we? Aren't we exceeding the budget amount quite a bit, or?
No, because our expenditure will only be the 500.
No, it's 570, it's
Five.
753. This is the way every compactor we purchase, we purchase them this way. We don't do a trade, we do the buyback. So we have to pay the full price up front, 753, $567.03. At the end of the 5 years, we'll get back the $245,000 expenditure. This year, when we purchase this one, we'll be getting back the buyback from the last unit, which is $103,317. So that's real close to that expenditure amount. It's right there.
Okay.
Right.
I assume you must think that buyback program is a good deal. I mean, how long does this piece of equipment typically last? I mean, if you've got a good piece of equipment and it lasts for 10, 20 years, is that buyback program necessarily a good program?
Yes, because I can tell you, these things are extremely expensive to repair. On every compactor that I have operated since I've been there, and I'm on my fourth one, going into the fifth one, we've lost an engine on them. And some of the drive systems are very expensive, so at the end of 5 years, they're in pretty rough shape. They're taking a pounding 6 days a week, 7.5 hours a day on that garbage. So, yeah, we're happy to have that. Our last buyback was 103,317. This is more than twice that. And but I guess that is kind of confusing, but that's the way that we do budget those. So we will, the net sale will be $508,567.03 at the end of the 5 years. But this year, we'll be getting back the 103,317 from the other vendor.
Other questions or comments? All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 6 is discussion of campaign finance ordinance. And this is something that's a transparency issue that I've kind of had on the back burner and been wanting to discuss with the council before the next election. And the next election is coming very soon, so now is the time to talk about this. Matt has put together a draft. This is totally up for review, and this isn't meant to be official or anything yet. We're still in the information gathering stage. If we are to move forward with an ordinance for campaign finance disclosure, we need to do this pretty soon though, because people will be taking out petitions. And Kristen, do you know what the first date is that people can take out a petition to run for council?
Sorry, yeah, April 9th.
Okay, so the idea is that this will have its first reading at the next council meeting, and then action April 1st. And so it will be in place for this next election. But several communities already do this, and Matt did some of the research. Could you just briefly tell us what you found, Matt?
Yes, Mayor. As to your last point there, just briefly did some research today on the other communities that may have a campaign contribution reporting requirement. I just looked at the top 10 communities by population in South Dakota. Sioux Falls, Rapid City, and Brookings are the only other 3 of those 10 that currently have a campaign finance reporting requirement. The other 6 communities I looked into, Aberdeen, Mitchell, Spearfish, Yankton, Huron, and Pierre, at least from what I could find in their online ordinances, unless for some reason that's not current. They do not currently have that sort of a requirement. There is a portion which you're all familiar with, of course, is the statement of financial interest that is already required by state law. We don't have that in our ordinance, but it is required by state law, and so we already are utilizing that piece of what you see in front of you here. This would just put it into our ordinance as well. The other disclosure requirements were essentially what this draft in front of you does. It essentially adopts for our local elections the same requirements that a legislative or county commission candidate would have, in that they would be subject to, for example, $1,000 maximum contribution from individuals. The reports, you have to report or disclose the identity of anybody that contributes over $100 to your campaign, et cetera. So with that, I would take questions, and I see Bob Faines in the audience here too. I know that he's been an advocate of bringing up this question. I'd invite him up to say his piece if he'd like to. Actually, the mayor can do that because I'm not the chairperson.
Please. Bob's been encouraging me to bring this forward for a while.
Yeah, I have. I've been, thank you, Madam Mayor. I thought I should show up tonight and at least say my piece, as I've been kind of harassing the mayor about it for quite some time now. And I guess where this originates from is you all, or most of you know, that I had agreed to be the treasurer for Mayor Thorson's campaign, and at the end of that, I'd been keeping track of dollars in, donations, expenditures. I'd been watching it all with the anticipation of having to file a report at some point in time. So the election is over, and I am all ready to file my report, and I can't find one. I thought, well, I must be missing something, so I called the Secretary of State's office and found out that Watertown has no requirements for any sort of campaign financing report. She told me, and you may be right, Matt, on the larger one, she said Watertown was the largest that didn't have one, so that would leave Aberdeen in question. You're probably accurate, but that was just hearsay when I was on the phone with her. But I guess my reasons behind it, you know, open government is important for a number of reasons. You really want to know who your candidates are associating with, and maybe it's also good knowledge in the future if you start seeing some things from candidates that you question. Okay, why is this person involved so much in part of our city government or state government, or you know, where is this coming from? This is someone that's involved with us a lot and seems to be having a lot of influence with our community that hasn't been around in the past. So it's good just to see that's part of open government and how it works, is to understand where the influencers are in the background behind campaigns. I expected to do this for the city because I've been through it in my time running for state representative, and I know sometimes the thought is that this is just us, this is just our community, it's our city. Why is that necessary? Well, let me point out that when I ran for office for state representative, my constituency was just this much larger than the mayor's. It was the same basic square as the city of Watertown, and that's fully required to be submitted during every election. There are two parts of it. There's setting limitations on how much any candidate can receive from any one person or entity in each calendar year, and then there is, of course, the reporting of you know, who gave how much money and how that money was spent and how much is left in the bank. They can, on the state level, they can be carried over from one campaign to the next. If you have money left over, you can keep it for next time. And I don't have the laws in front of me, and Matt probably knows better, but should you still have money left in your account when you no longer choose to run for re-election, there are ways that can be legally dispersed as well. And I think the biggest thing is we've all seen it. It's trickling down. It starts at a national level, and national campaigns get dirty. State campaigns tend to get dirty. It's coming. It's working its way down. And I think it's only a matter of time before it gets all the way down to the alderman campaigns. That you know, the anonymous blogs and things that go on the internet has made it so. It's just gotten so deep and so nasty in some areas that I think that's even a better reason for campaign finance reporting, is it helps keep campaigns cleaner because the people who are writing the checks have to put their name on it. You can't be in that shadow in the background. You know, if they give money to a PAC, the PAC then, if there's campaign reporting, the PAC has to tell you who donated to the PAC. So, you know, it opens things up, and I think in the net result, it helps keep for cleaner, more upright campaigns, and helps just keep open government doing the things that it should do. So with that, I guess my final comment is I really don't see a downside. You know, I can't imagine what the downside to this could be, so I would encourage you to support this idea, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Bob. Councilman Danforth?
Bob, a couple of questions. First of all, if you are whatever the terms are within here, does that apply to the PAC as well? So if it's $1,000 max, half a report over 100, does those things, the same terms apply to the PAC?
You know, I honestly don't know for sure. There are state and federal laws regarding PACs. I think that's something Matt would probably have to check into, because I don't know. I hate to tell you the wrong information. I think so, but I'm not positive about that.
Okay, the next question would be, if I'm running for office and you really like me, could you say, Mike, I'm going to give you free advertising on my radio station?
No, I can't, because number one, I'm not allowed to, but also if I did, well, I guess I'd be allowed to as long as I gave your competitor the same amount free. But you would also have to disclose that as an in-kind contribution.
And that would be a part of this as well?
Yes, it would.
Okay, good.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, you know, if somebody hosts a fundraiser for you, for example, and doesn't make the campaign pay for any of the food and drink and that sort of thing, that can be, that goes towards an in-kind contribution as well.
Right.
Councilman Vilhauer?
Couple of questions or comments. What happens, okay, let's say we adopt an ordinance similar to this. What happens if these reports are not filed?
The provisions of the chapter that you'd be adopting would allow, there's actually two or three different ways that a violator can be penalized. The first, most basic, is if you miss the deadline, for example, by 5 days. The law allows for a $50 per day penalty. The second is just a statutory civil penalty that the finance office can impose on somebody for violating any other type of provision in the ordinance not related to the days late. And then finally, the law also gives, in this case, the city attorney the ability to prosecute somebody for a Class 2 misdemeanor if those other penalties, on top of those other penalties potentially.
And if I could input on that, Matt, I think that that's current state law, but I believe if you create an ordinance, you could adjust those sort of
Correct.
things to however
Correct.
you wanted them.
Correct. So what you see in front of you is very straightforward adoption of basically the state statutory scheme that legislators would have to follow. We are empowered to make adjustments to that by state law.
Okay, this is similar to what you had to file, Bob. As I understand, county commissioners, sheriff, et cetera, they've got to file
Yeah, any counties-
similar reports as well?
Any counties with a population of 10,000 or more have to do this. Some of the smallest ones do not. That's for commissioners. I don't know about sheriffs and such, but I believe that's for all
I'm pretty sure the
counties.
sheriff had to file this last, because anyway, I guess I got to say, I wholly support the idea. I have to say, when I ran 4 years ago for this position, I was surprised too there was nothing that was required. I remember after I took my petition out, I talked to the finance office, was told nothing had to be done. Well, I still wasn't quite satisfied, so I called Secretary of State's office too, and that's what I was told too, that Watertown does not. So I was somewhat surprised at that. Now, if you're looking for a downside, the only thing that comes to mind, it's a personal thought, is that we have a hard time at times getting people to run for this position, and now we're adding one more piece or one additional obligation to get the job done to run for this position. But again, that's a relatively minor thing in my thinking, but that is just one potential downside to it.
Councilman Roby?
I would ask this question of Bob and Matt. If we're going to follow the state laws pretty much verbatim, that's what is kind of being proposed here. Having been a state office holder, is there anything in there that is not applicable to a local election or that would have any rub at all?
I will research that, but to top of mind, I don't see anything like that. On a statewide level, we get a lot more contributions from statewide associations, the state medical association, the state legal, on and on. A lot of you probably belong to statewide organizations that do a lot of campaign contributions, but those are listed right along with the individual ones. But I'll read through it and see if I spot anything. I like your mug. I will. I don't think I can think of any off the top of my head, though, Don.
A couple, Councilman Roby, a couple of items I would point out that are explicitly different than state law is, one, we aren't adopting the requirement of supplemental reports that is required in the state statute. That would be, you see those reports that candidates have to file in the last couple days of the campaign to show any large last-minute contributions. We would not require that in this current draft. And also, the days, as far as the reporting deadlines, are a little bit different in this draft as they are in the state law as it pertains to legislators. So,
Councilman Danforth?
And I don't know if this is Bob for you or Matt for you, but in reading here, it's in the campaign finance statements, it says that the report must be submitted 11 days prior to an election, right?
actually, it'd be the Tuesday prior to the election, so the report includes contributions from 11 days. So basically, the election's on a Tuesday, 11 days before is Friday. So the idea is that the cutoff is the Friday, 11 days before the election, and your report is due the following Tuesday, essentially a week before the election.
Okay. The thing that seemed odd to me about that, is we don't have any recourse of removing somebody from the ballot should they not submit this on time, right? So the people that are trying to make a decision and understanding who might be pushing buttons in the background, right? That's what this is about, honesty and opening. If I'm evil, per se, I'm going to go and say, if it is an issue, right, I'll just go and I won't turn it in and I'll pay the $100 fine or whatever it is. And the election gets done and we all move on. That seems odd to me.
This,
Because we're doing this about honesty and transparency, but yet truly there's no ramification other than a few bucks should you not do it. Just seems odd to me.
well, technically, Class 2 misdemeanor could result in 30 days in jail or up to a $500 fine. So, of course, as with any law, there's the risk that people just disregard it. But if you get elected to city council and get charged with a Class 2 misdemeanor shortly thereafter, there might be some red flags with the general public that voted you in. But
And I don't think there's any way you can remove someone from the ballot because of that legally anyway, but if it didn't show up afterwards, there's a couple guys sitting here that would make a lot of noise about it after the election, I know. It would certainly come out because it is public record.
Councilman Bueller?
Hi, Bob.
Hey, Bruce.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Is there some sort of a standardized form that they provide you that you fill out and then, but another question I have to, I want to add to that. If you bank contributions, say you bank $1,000, I'm just throwing this out. If you had $1,000 in your account, do you keep receipts for all of the things that for all of your expenditures? And then you look to see whether or not that $1,000, you didn't spend it all. Say you only spent $700 of it. That additional $300 that's left over, what typically happens to that? Right now, you're saying you can transfer it to your next campaign, or what else?
Right, well, part of the form, and there are forms available, and it would be up to Matt if he chose to use the same ones that the state uses, they're all there. So it'd be easy to take state off and put City of Watertown on the top, and so it's easy forms to fill out. And the other question is, yes, if you had money left over, you'd open a separate account, which I imagine some of you already did for campaigns, keep it separate from your personal funds. But if there's money left over, you can keep, as long as you keep that account open, you can keep that money in there. But when you move it out of there are a number of ways that you can legally disperse of it. I know you can give it to other candidates, you can give it to charity. There's a number of ways of doing it, but as long as you keep that account open, that money can sit there.
But it would require receipts for your expenditures throughout your.
Yeah, I don't know how many years. I'm sure there's a number of years you have to keep them, but yeah, you keep your receipts and and there's a income sheet on the reports you file and the expense sheet as well.
yeah, I would say similar to, a tax return, if there was ever any sort of question that you falsified the report, you'd want to have the records to back up the activity that was reported.
Anyone else want to ask or comment? All right, then, if you come up with something that you'd like Matt to either include or change, let him know. Otherwise, we'll plan to put this on as a first reading at the next council meeting. And thank you, Bob, for coming. Appreciate it. Item number 7 is old business. Is there any old business? None. Is there new business? I know we have a couple items of new business. Heath, you want to go first?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Mayor. One thing I wanted to address with the council this evening was a document that was handed out before them. I believe you got a hard copy of what's labeled as an application for SPR-funded transportation study. And I first want to apologize for bringing this after the matter. Conventionally, I would have brought this before you at the last meeting to get authorization to apply for this grant. I do want to note that this grant application does not commit us to anything until the time of award, when we would enter into an agreement with the state. With that being said, I found out kind of at the last minute as far as the deadline for this grant being due, and felt that it was a valuable resource for Watertown to try to take advantage of in financing a great majority of our next transportation master plan. Our last transportation master plan was completed in 2005, so that document is now 14 years old. As you can see in the narrative of that application, I tried to address on, generally speaking, a lot of the growth, development, redevelopment, things of that nature, school expansions that's happened within and throughout the community. And what my intent is that if awarded a grant, an updated study would cost an estimated $200,000. In this application, in conversation with the mayor and with her agreement, I put in there a 25% match from the community, which at most would put us at a $50,000 obligation for a new long-range transportation plan. The other thing I wanted to point out too is we're in the process of updating our comprehensive land use plan. First District is completing that process with us as we speak. I believe it was 2017, we completed a pavement management system study where we have pavement management data that was collected throughout this community on the current conditions of our pavement. So what I was hoping to do is, this is kind of the third leg to that three-legged stool. We have a comprehensive land use plan update. We have an updated pavement management system. And now with an updated transportation master plan, we'd be well suited for several years to come in planning major transportation improvements throughout and around Watertown.
Thank you. And I'd like to add, we have a study done in 2005. It has been a really important tool in our transportation planning. And we have the southerly connector route, which is 20th Avenue South. It goes by the ethanol plant and back up by Sharp Chevrolet and Highway 20. And that was envisioned in there, as was Willow Creek Drive. Those were suggested projects that came out of the plan. And, realignment of Highway 81 and some other projects. And we've done a lot of them. There's some more that are in there, but it's old enough that we're really starting to grasp at what to do in some of our major improvements, and would like to see this plan updated. It's an excellent deal for us to have the state pick up 75% of the cost if we get the grant, so that would be great. And we did pursue the same program for our pavement management, and I was in charge of that, and the state was so good to work with and helpful to us. They want us to do this kind of thing. So I think it's a really good opportunity. And we would have put it on sooner. It's just been super busy. Didn't get it on as authorization, but it would come back before the council for approval. If we got a grant, there would be action by the council whether or not to accept the grant. So you'll have that at that point. So. Any questions or comments? Councilman Danforth?
Heath, when you apply for this, what year would this occur in then, that we would see that expense? 20, 21?
Yeah, that's a great question. So how this program would work on the state's end, their fiscal year begins July 1st for this program. They would allocate those funds effective July 1 for the report to begin in July or August of 2019. But they then pay for all the expenses throughout the duration of the report period to create do all the studies and create the report. So in their application letter, it does say that reimbursement to the South Dakota DOT should be anticipated to be received in the summer or fall of 2020. So what that would effectively do, and I would of course work with Kristen and the council on this, we could allocate any financial responsibility that the city has, either in combination of current fiscal year funds or the next year's 2020's fiscal year funds for the city.
Right, so we would have it included in the budget should we receive it.
Exactly.
Versus coming in 19. And then second, does the DOT do this, or is it contracted out?
They have a list of approved, pre-selected, qualified consultants that they choose from to perform these studies.
They'd let us choose. I think they'd.
Or work.
I mean, they have a list, a short list, and we can do RFPs and let them do a song and dance for us, or we can just pluck one off the list. That's up to us. And they'll honor that. Councilman Vilhar?
Heath, you made reference that this is another part of the three-legged stool. Okay, the comprehensive land use plan, that's going to be, it's getting close to coming before us, before too far down the road. Is that a fair statement? Does this, to me, it seemed like they should have been done at the same time. Does one build off the other, or do we adopt one and then this builds off the comprehensive land use plan? Can you explain that a little bit? To me, it seemed like they should have been done at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's another great point, Councilman Vilhar, Madam Mayor. So how this would conventionally be done, I wouldn't say that they're always done in tandem with each other, but there is a lot of overlapping information. The transportation section of the comprehensive land use plan obviously references our functional classification map, our major street plan, and things of that nature that affect the growth and the development within the community. So with that being said, we are updating those maps with the comprehensive land use plan to the best of our knowledge and ability. Would it be easier and a little more detailed to do that with this study having been done? Yes, you're right there. But we are able to use our professional experience with the engineering office and the city planner and First District to put together a fairly responsible map and educated guess of what that growth would look like in the comp plan. What this will do now is kind of check our estimates and go a little bit more in detail in this analysis. And if there is any amendments that we see that aren't in line with the comp plan, actually we just visited with First District today on this, and what we have done in the past is then update or amend the comp plan's transportation maps to better coincide with a transportation master plan.
So one won't render the other useless or irrelevant, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Right. Councilman Albertson?
Heath, when would be the first indication that we would get this? Not really get the money, I heard when you said that, but when would we have some idea? Because it almost sounds like we should be thinking, if we don't get it, what's our plan? You know, it sounds like it's a pretty important part of making plans for the city. So worst case scenario, no, first of all, when would the indication be we would get it? And then secondly, what if we don't? What's our next plan?
Great question, Councilman Albertson. Madam Mayor, the application does not indicate a definitive approval timeline, but just based on their timeline for when the study would start of July or August of this year, I anticipate in the next month, maybe two, we should be getting some kind of notification of whether we were awarded that or not. To your second point, another great question. I think that, we would have to reconvene and give this some thought on whether we'd want to entertain financing the full expense of a study on our own, or whether we wait till the next cycle of applications. These are on an annual basis. These funds are available on an annual basis. So we could reapply next March as well if we were not to receive funding this year.
Good questions. Anyone else? All right, thanks. And then we have another new business item from Matt.
Thank you, Mayor. Heath, did you want to address the other, or are you going to go? Was there?
Oh.
I did have one more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Heath.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The last item I had real quick was discussion on, we're gearing up for the 2019 construction projects and trying to look forward to getting those projects out for bid. One of the action items that I caught a little bit on, got a little bit in on back in August when I started here, was that the council has commonly approved advertising for bid of each of these projects. The question I wanted to pose to the council this evening is if you were okay with us foregoing that step. And the logic I would apply there is that these projects have all been approved through the last year's budget cycle. They're all listed and itemized in the 212 fund that they're being funded from for the most part. But what that one additional step does that I was hoping to help our process with is it does just create one more step and sometimes can push the advertisement of a bid out up to 2 weeks because of the cycle of council meetings. It would just help streamline and add efficiencies to our process of getting these projects out to the public for advertising. If you were all comfortable with that, negating the step of you approving the advertisement for bid. Of course, once it was bid, those bids would come back to you for approval to give the mayor authority to sign those contracts. None of those formalities would change whatsoever. It's just the step of giving us approval to advertise for bid.
Councilman Bueller?
I honestly can't remember a time when we didn't approve a bid process like that. I don't think it, in my opinion, I think that would be a good change to our process. I do. I agree with that.
Councilman Roby?
That was just a matter of policy or protocol, but it's nothing written in ordinance. It was just a matter of habit.
Right,
That's correct.
right. And it's, when you're busy during the construction season, it's one thing, you just go down the list of budget items and ask the council for authorization for all of them, or, which is kind of meaningless because you haven't designed the project yet, or you get done with the design and you're wanting to get it out to bid, and, forgot to ask for authorization to advertise for bids, then it's slowing you down. So I think it's fine if you want to give an update on projects without an action from the council, just to keep you up to date, and with anticipation that we're going to advertise for bids for everything in the budget. And if something is really off, we didn't budget enough money, and we're gonna talk to you before we advertise for bids anyway. But if it's just a routine thing that it looks like our estimate's falling within the amount we had budgeted, it's really just an extra step that can slow the staff down.
And Madam Mayor, if I could, to that point, I love the fact that gets information to the council, that step. But another means to do that, if we were to forego this approval of advertising for bids, one thing I was hoping to implement, and I don't know as though we've done this in the past, was to provide perhaps a biweekly construction report. It would simply be an Excel spreadsheet, front and back page, nothing too in-depth, but that would provide that to the council, that gives each project by name, generally location, where it's at in the process. But that's something I've been accustomed to doing in the past as well, that I found helped keep the council very informed on each one of those projects, as they are oftentimes approached in the public and need to field questions related to those projects.
Yeah, that'd be good. Councilman Danforth?
I agree with the direction that you suggested, Heath, and have often wondered why we have that extra step in there, quite honestly. But we do that with a lot of items that we budget, correct? And if we're budgeting and we know what is being requested and we have it in our budget and our CIP, why are we not allowing our department heads to go out automatically and make those requests, those RFQs or RFPs, whatever it is? Because I'm trying to think of a time when we didn't approve it, what that condition or circumstance would be. If anybody
Right.
else can remember when we haven't done that, I would think that if there's a concern, the mayor, the finance officer, and the engineer or the department head's gonna have had conversations and come to us, or they're gonna negate going out. There's something gonna be, there's a checks and balances in there that would stop something from going out. But the worst case scenario is we go out and it gets here and we go, no. Now, that'd be unfortunate, but that would be that's the ultimate checks and balance that we have. So I think we need to, personally, I think we need to expand that beyond what we're talking about right now. It just seems appropriate to me.
Yeah, Kristen nudged me here and said, well, you're going to ask if it applies to everything, so. That's, we would like some direction on that too, and even
Equipment projects, that's kind of
My opinion is that as long as we have the checks and balances with the mayor, the department head, if we ever have a city manager, whatever that is, we have the checks and balances that ultimately it gets here for approval, acceptance of a bid. There's no harm, no foul in that scenario. If we're budgeting those items, to me, we've already blessed the
Right.
process, and it's just a formality. I think it does apply. And maybe there's some exceptions to that, but I would like to see us procedurally do it correctly, not correctly, more effectively, efficiently, in what you've suggested, Heath, and then deal with the exception, whatever those are, than to regularly be less effective.
Yep.
I would point out that we already, in some instances, skipped that step. Just earlier this evening, Mike came forward with this idea to go through the NJPA source well. In that case, there will never be a bid advertisement, so that won't be that step anyway. So just an FYI.
Right, but again, it's a little update, and we'll continue to give you updates as projects proceed, just so you know. This is the stage that we're at, and I really like the idea of having the periodic update on the status. It helps the council stay in touch. Anything else, Heath?
No, that was it. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, now Matt.
Thank you, Mayor. I will just pass this out. Just an FYI, what we're discussing here is the setting the licensing fee for retail, for full-service on-sale restaurant licenses, and I'll explain just a second here. Okay, so what you have in front of you here is a resolution that the council passed on March 2nd, 2009. In 2008, the legislature created this new class of alcoholic beverage licenses that were geared towards restaurants. The big caveat there is they have to have over 60% of their gross sales have to be related to food. And the council passed the resolution after the finance office surveyed the current regular quote-unquote liquor license holders as to what their market value of their licenses were. Excuse me. And ultimately set that fee at $205,000. In the last 10 years, nobody has taken advantage of that. I've only been here a little over a year now. I know there's been one mild kind of semi-inquiry, but they didn't express real serious interest. Prior to that, to be honest with you, I'm not sure how much, if at any, interest there was in this license. But anyway, this resolution, as you see, expired at the end of December 2008. And the law now, so basically when it was first, the statute was first enacted, it required municipalities to set that license fee according to that fair market value to protect the current license holders. After 10 years, the law no longer requires that. It gives the municipality the flexibility to raise or lower the fee as they see fit. Now, with the caveat that it has to be over the number of residents in the last federal census. So whatever Watertown was in 2010, that's the lowest you could set the fee at, 22,000 or something like that. So the question is just for discussion this evening as to where we think we want to go as far as setting this fee, if we want to keep it at a market rate, or if we want to explore lowering the fee to potentially make it more affordable for somebody starting a restaurant that's going to serve primarily food. But regardless, we do have to pass a new resolution in the near future to set this fee because the previous resolution has expired. So I'd open it up for discussion if anybody has any thoughts.
Councilman Roby?
First of all, Matt, I know I typically recuse myself from these issues. I'm okay talking about this one because we're not voting on anything.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, here's my question. Is that current number limiting economic development in terms of bringing restaurants to Watertown?
Plus $1,000 it costs for a liquor license, and so a more affordable fee could potentially offer the ability for them to do that. But
Then the follow-up question is, let's say you cut it in half, then what about all the people that paid the original fee?
That's why you guys get to make that decision and not us.
Councilman Danforth?
I'm a little confused here.
Okay. I was too.
Well,
Honest with you.
I get confused, the whole licensing thing confuses the heck out of me, quite honestly, but there's been historically, this migration of licenses from the county into the city, and then we had problems with that, and you remember all that whole thing, and how does this differ from that process that we can only, I've always been told we can only have so many licenses? How does this then differ from the example I was just giving you? I don't know if that's clear or not, but.
Yeah, no, this creates a whole new class of license. And so the limit that we have of 20, well, actually, I think our limit is 25, but we have one extra because of an annexation, that sort of thing. But those no strings attached, I would call them, I guess, licenses are limited. This is a whole new class of license. And so if somebody were to come in, let's say somebody had bought one of these 5 years ago, they would pay us that $205,000. Then, let's say we just sold one, and next business comes along, we find out the previous purchaser still operating their business, but they're telling us they can get on this registry that state law mandates. It says, hey, I'm offering my license for sale, so if anybody comes in and asks for a license, you have to offer mine first, essentially. So it kind of creates this mechanism where we don't continue to sell a bunch of licenses. We first have to see if anybody on the market wants to sell theirs in order for them to recoup their costs that they paid us to begin with. But there's no limit on the number of them on the flip side of that.
Councilman Bueller?
Matt, help me out. How does this differ from the current license that they would need?
So the
What is
current,
the differentiation between that, the requirements for that versus what this new classification would be?
so the current license would be the license that all the liquor selling bars, taverns, those types of locations have. So they could sell, their revenue can come from 100% liquor. This license is subject to an annual accounting showing us that over 60% of their gross revenue comes from food.
Councilman Lallam?
Yeah, basically what they'd be able to do is, if someone had a bar license, we'll call it, just for easier discussion purposes, they would be able to sell that if they're gonna just strictly go more towards a restaurant style. Is that what we're looking at doing?
Well,
That's what they have the option of doing now? I should
correct.
say?
So I mean, I won't start naming places, but I'm sure there's places in town right now that probably meet the 60% threshold that have a regular liquor license that potentially, but they've had the opportunity the last 10 years to do so and they haven't.
So like a chain type restaurant or something along those lines where they,
Sure.
usually sell more food and they happen to have.
Right, I don't know what their balance sheet or their
Right.
income statement looks like, I guess, but I would suspect that some of those restaurants probably sell more food than booze, but I don't know that for sure.
I think what this would probably be the bigger one for is if it's not a chain restaurant. If we look at raising, lowering, whatever it's gonna be, we're trying to get a local person to start a restaurant. The 200,000 is obviously a huge number, and I think liquor license, do we have a last price on those? I heard they're up 250.
Yeah, just rumor, but yeah, 225, 250, I've heard.
I mean, that's a huge stopping block for anyone that wants to open a restaurant.
Anyone else? Councilman Danforth?
Well, it has less flexibility and thus less value than one with no restrictions on it. Do we have to do this tonight? Are you looking for?
No, I'm just looking for some discussion and then we'll bring forth the resolution at some point because we need to reset the fee because the previous resolution expired.
Are you guys aware of when a license is sold and how much it's sold for? You're not.
But so back in 2009, when the statute was first enacted, it required the on-sale license holders to furnish us with the information of their transaction so we can set that current fair market value. That's no longer the case. So we could, say we wanted to try to set it to the current fair market value, again, we could certainly ask people to divulge that information, but they wouldn't know it, they would no longer be required to by law. They were back in 2009 required to tell us how much they paid for their license in order for us to set this fee amount.
I personally do feel, in comparison to other communities, that we are more restrictive, and will have more burden on potential people coming into our community to open up more full-service type restaurants. I do believe we will. Again, I guess I didn't remember this type of license, but it's a lot of money for somebody coming into town and spending 200,000 plus or minus something from that to start up a license. Now, availability is one issue when you look at the other licenses. But I don't know what the answer is in regards to what that number should be set at, but I do believe we are likely eliminating certain businesses from coming into town.
The number that we have was set based on our population, and we were frozen because we had more. Were other communities, do you know? Is everybody in the same boat?
As far as the freezing of our regular
Yeah.
licenses,
Like, were there some communities that didn't have that percentage of liquor licenses to population?
I don't know that for sure, but they are all subject to the same limitation that we are, but I don't know if at the time that they implemented that limitation, if some were below it still.
Right.
I'm not sure of that. But
And I wonder where our 205 sits in relation to the other, do you know? Either of you guys know?
Mayor, I believe we're all under the same rule for.
Oh, that
the
was
number.
statewide?
No. So the 205 was our local market, current fair market value. I couldn't answer that. I couldn't tell you what they came up with in the other communities that did this. You didn't have to do this. This was optional. The city of Watertown chose to implement this. This is not something that every community has necessarily. But I will say that I talked to the municipal league, and if we reset the fee, we'll be the first community to reset the fee, because we were so quick to implement this license back then that we're the first one to approach the 10-year expiration.
Oh,
So,
so
Mayor, if I
we
could-
would continue, if someone came tomorrow and we haven't reset the fee, we would just use the 205 that we set 10 years ago?
yes.
But Mayor, I do believe, and correct me, Matt, if I'm wrong, we're all under the same formula for how many we can have, but different communities have different methods for pricing out there's some of them don't leave it up to the free market. I believe Brookings, City of Brookings owns their licenses.
Well, they don't have you're talking about on sale. I'm not sure exactly how that works. You could be right, but they have a municipal liquor store.
They own, the city of, through their municipal liquor, they own all the licenses and issue them. So they control that, to
But
my
they're
understanding.
they're still limited by the
They're
same law.
limited, but I don't think the issue here, this isn't limitation, because we're allowing
No,
more of them.
Right,
We're talking about the cost of the license.
Right,
Is
and
what
nobody's
that's where I'm
taking-
going. This, because we can issue how many of these? Any number? So we have the ability, as long as it is a full-service restaurant.
right, but if you're thinking that we are unfairly or more restrictive than other communities, how so?
I'm saying that I believe, at least in certain aspects, I believe the fact that ours is just a free market scenario. I think the cost of them in town can be different, and probably is different than some of our competing communities. It'd be interesting to know
Yeah, it would be.
what the other communities are doing in that regard, but that's what I have heard. I've heard from some businesses that were looking to get here and said, too expensive.
I've heard that too. In fact, at the home show this past weekend, people were talking to me about this very issue, so. Anyone else want to weigh in at this point? Councilman Albertson?
Well, what's the resolve for it, though? I mean, if we've already got it, we're here with so many people are in these, you can't really cut it back, can you? Or
No, well,
how would you?
if you did offer it for a lower price to increase the number of restaurants that serve alcohol, I'm sure there would be some upset
Yeah,
license holders complaining that we had just devalued their
Their
liquor
prop, yeah.
license.
Yeah, just to make sure it's clear. I mean, this is a different license than the one that people paid 200,000 plus for. That license will probably always have more value in the market because it doesn't have restrictions. Well, I take that back. There are plenty of restrictions on alcohol sellers, but not the food restriction. Yeah.
Councilman Lallam?
Matt, can you do a little research and see, like maybe what Brookings Aberdeen, what they have for their, if they have a fee schedule for this? You know, just so we can kind of get a comparison. I mean, ours is 205. Are they 50? Are they 100? You know, just to kind of give us some sort of idea where we're sitting compared to some of the other communities.
Yeah, I can do that. That would have been their current fair market value back when they adopted the ordinance, so I can see where they're at with that. But just to repeat, the municipal league said that if we reset our fee, we'll be the first community to do so. So.
I'd like to see where we're at just in comparison at that time. Even.
Right. Okay, yeah, I can certainly look into that.
Thank you. Councilman Manti?
I just stumbled on is the liquor license cap stunting the growth of Sioux Falls? And this is a late 2018. It looks like they're dealing with the same issue. It's the same exact kind of license that they're talking about. At that point, when they wrote the article, it was 192,360. And then they have the same issue we have, is once they're out there, we don't know what's going on with them, you know, and how much they're selling for. And in here, they're predicting that they're up as high as 260,000 plus as far as the retail market. And so they are talking about, you know, frustrations and questions, and the same thing Mike was saying about, and Adam, about people coming. So the cost of licenses, let's see, charges about $1.25 per person right now. Anyway, so I guess we're not the only one looking at it, is what I'm trying to say. They just haven't made any decisions yet. We may be ahead of the game about looking, but it looks like pricing-wise and issue-wise, and, you know, are we turning people away? Are we stunting growth? Is this too much money? What do we do? You know, we're not the only one. So it might not hurt to be in touch with, you know, some of these other cities that are really right at the beginning of their process as well.
Yeah, I just did a quick search here of Aberdeen. It looks like they adopted this ordinance about the same time we did. So either they are in the current in the process of revising theirs, like we are discussing, or maybe they have already and the municipal league didn't know about it. So I'll reach out to some communities and see where those fees are at.
Right, because it is the same South Dakota law, you know, that they're talking about in here. But they start the paragraph with, right now, with dozens of new businesses trying to get open in Sioux Falls, many of them restaurants, the liquor license situation can make things complicated. And then they go on to talk about all the, and that was the thing that I was thinking, is that how many different scenarios of liquor license combinations do we have, you know, out there right now? So that's another thing. You know, we have beer, you know, malt beverage only, and we have this kind of thing. So, you know, it's a little bit messy, really, I think, as far as the liquor license categories.
All right, Councilman Bueller?
Matt, just clarification from you. We're looking at two different things here is the way I see it. One is what we want to charge for the license for 100% alcohol, and then we're looking at, we're not. Okay, I want to make sure I understand that. So what we're looking at, when you're talking about 60% of the gross revenues being from food, and this being a different type of license, how does that relate to the one where the guy has to, he can sell pure booze? I mean, he doesn't have to sell a percentage of food to qualify for that license.
Right. Yep, that's correct. So there's that's one class of license. It's an on-sale license, and that's currently being bought and sold in the free market. They have to come to us every year and renew it, and so there's a $1,500, I believe, renewal fee that goes along with that. But what we're talking about here is this full-service restaurant license fee, and the reason it's so much more than $1,500 is because we'd be the initial seller of it, because we're the only, there is none that exists currently. So we'd be the initial seller, and then then they could eventually be traded in the free market.
Councilman Danforth?
So if I were to buy one of these, and then at some point I want to sell it, it's up to me to sell it. Now it's at the free market, right? It doesn't stay at this dollar figure, correct?
Actually, the law requires, if I read it correctly, that we maintain this registry. So let's say you bought a license, operated your restaurant for a few years, decide you didn't want to do it anymore. You told us, hey, my license is for sale. Adam comes over and says, hey, Watertown, I'd like to buy one of these licenses. Then we would be obligated to refer him to you. And if you are not willing to sell at the market, at the rate that we set here, he can come back and buy from us. If you're willing to sell at the market, at that rate that we set, then he would be required to buy from you.
Anyone else? All right, thanks, Matt. We do have a reason to go into executive session unless you want me to wait. Do we have enough time?
It's up to you, Mayor.
Okay, well, I think it's not gonna take a big amount of time, so we'll go into executive session to discuss and consult with legal counsel on the contractual matter, and we do not expect to take action upon coming out. So I'll look for a motion to go into executive session. A motion by Mantee, second by Lallam. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. We are in executive session.